Alright, welcome to tonight's session on construction management. And what we do tonight is we're just going to look at the demand side of construction management, how it influences the industry, and we're also going to touch on the organizational structures. Now, the organizational structures you'll see starts playing a role later on during the course. When you do assessment item number 2 and assessment item number 3, when you have to come up with your organizational structure that you have to choose for your business plan. Alright, so that's going to help you a lot if you're going to look at those. Alright, so how is demand and supply in our industry broken into or broken down? Basically it's residential, non-residential, and then of course infrastructure, and that's where we see a big boom at the moment. The infrastructure market is really taking off. The residential market is obviously slowing down a little bit, and you guys that's in the coalface, you should feel this a lot better than we do up here. So if you have personal experience on how the residential market in your areas is declining or increasing, please feel free to add that information in there. The industry status, if we think about what's happened since about 2007, 2008 and 9, the global financial crisis, all of that slowed it down completely. Australia was spared somewhat and didn't suffer the same fate as most of Europe and of course the North American states. Now what we see in the market is that it's once again slowing down. Everybody's watching the euro and seeing what's going on there. Yet again, the Australian economy seems to be vigilant and resilient to that effect. We're still maintaining a reasonably positive growth. If you think back to those figures that we showed last week during the session, you'll remember that even though everything else has slowed down, the construction industry increased marginally. Alright, so if we see the immediate effect or the immediate future, it sort of is a pendulum effect. The effects of the actions that we take now will only be visible sometime later. So for instance, the new laws that we pass at this point in time, the effects of that will only be visible later on, and most possibly during a during the next government, most probably. If we think about the state government, and just talking about Queensland at the moment, they're sort of approaching the end or their sell-by date, and I won't be surprised if we don't have an election before the end of 2011 in Queensland. So I think Anna Bligh is sort of aligning herself and making plans and seeing when's the best time to call for an election. I don't think they'll go for the full term. I think they'll call it at a point in time where they feel that voters are inclined to vote for them. Alright, so obviously also politics plays a game there. If we look at the sector analysis that we have at the moment, and these figures have been updated somewhat, you'll see the numbers in your study guide is slightly different. This is the numbers that I found today, so it's really up to date. The residential is about 89% of the residential market is in the private sector. So that means that we're building houses and residential estates, that type of thing goes into the private sector. If we think about the public sector, residential, really a small little bit over there, only 11%. The big one there that's changed, non-residential, private sector and public sector, you'll see that's a big change from the previous numbers. And then of course infrastructure engineering gone down from the private sector. It's only now 49%. The public sector is picking up the difference there, and the reason might be, there might be various reasons for that. We might see more international investments coming into Australia. I think one of the big things that we have to take in mind is the influx of Chinese capital into Australia. They certainly grabbing the land that we own for the mines, and it's going to be interesting to see exactly where that's going to end in a few years' time. If we think about the market demand for residential areas, basically we can break it down into various sectors. Over there, the residential market, it's basically either cookie cutter, repetitive type work, really easy stuff where we have the same building that we're going to build over and over again, or it can also be a first of a kind, one of a kind type building. Right, and obviously the cookie cutter repetitive work is much higher. It's easier to do, and it takes up a bigger segment of the market. The demand, or the total demand in the industry for residential, is about 40%, and then of course the non-residential stuff split once again between industrial manufacturing and commercial. That's about 20-25%. If we look at infrastructure, that should actually be at 20 over there. If we look at infrastructure and engineering projects, it's going to be interesting to see where this ends in a couple of years, because the only thing that we need to upset the whole coal drive at the moment is for somebody to find out that there's a better way of doing it without coal. So power plants, power stations, nuclear, all of those, definitely something to consider. If we think about nuclear power stations, coal-powered power stations need about 300 tons worth of coal to generate the same amount of power that you can get out of a nuclear power station using the fuel that's in a squash ball or a racquetball ball. So that's also something that we need to think about. The downside of nuclear is, of course, if accidents happen, and of course, what do we do with the waste? Alright, so infrastructure projects and those, they take up about 35% of the market at that point. If we look at the current market conditions, this is just something that's really interesting that I picked up today. This is also, these figures are from today's newspapers and from today's research. Melbourne, more, and you'd be able to tell us if this is true or not. It's about $350 a week. That's less than what I pay. What are you paying at the moment?
What would that be for, like a house?
That would be for a 3-bedroom house, one bathroom and one carport type structure.
Probably depends where, but I would generally say more than that.
Alright. Yeah, most probably the average that they calculate contains, you know, the greater metropolitan substructure. It's not the center of town. I think in the center of Melbourne you'll be hard pressed to find anything for $350 a week.
Yeah.
Well, if I think about myself, I pay exactly the median rent in Rocky. I pay $390 over here, and that's been the same for about the last 2 years. But I think the reason why my rent hasn't gone up is because I know the landlord really well, and they're sort of happy with you know, me not breaking down their place. Interestingly enough, this Murunba this is an interesting one that came out earlier this week or late last week. The median weekly rent there is jumped up to $3,200, which is not affordable for the local community. You know, so the schools, teacher, and those guys that supply the infrastructure services, they cannot attain that type of rent. And this is now the whole fly-in, fly-out argument from the start again, because everybody is against it, but yet they charge these ludicrous amounts for rent in these small towns. So when you download this document, I've added a little hyperlink there. You can click on the link and it will take you to the article that will inform you a little bit better. If we look at the median house prices, once again I've only taken the numbers for the regional areas, and specifically the one that I wanted to show you there. You can see small mining town over there, really nothing grand. There's definitely no riverfronts or beachfront homes there. Price has gone up to about 600,000, which is really a lot of money if you think for what you're going to get for it. Alright, so those figures just indicative of where the market conditions are going, and of course how it's going to influence the industry. So if we think about the suppliers of service in our industry, basically the employers or the clients, they supply some kind of service for us. They provide us with projects that we can work with. The professional team, they actually, from this point further on, this is where we now see real development. Designers, they provide professional services. The engineers, they obviously do the design from an engineering point of view, soil conditions, foundation design, structures, everything like that. Quantity surveyors or cost engineers, they fulfill a specific role in the estimating of the total cost of the project, and of course at the end of the project to go and decide if we've paid too much or too little for it. Project managers and supervisors, project managers typically look at the execution of the project from a holistic point of view, while the supervisors, that's just a term that I've picked up in the market. It's actually a term from the Middle East or Africa. Supervisors refer to people looking after the quality of a specific project. So if you deal with contract forms like FIDIC and the NEC, you'll see that it refers specifically to project managers and supervisors. Alright, and then of course material suppliers. This is a big one. Last week we spoke about the price of fuel locally and in the metropolitan areas, and in Rockhampton the fuel price at the moment is about $1.62 for premium unleaded, and I think you can buy the same product up north Downsville way or down south Brisbane way for about $1.40. So being in the middle of nowhere does come with some costs, and the same with our material suppliers. They obviously have to go through a big logistical exercise to make sure that they get the stuff where it's supposed to be. Contractors and subcontractors, what we see at the moment is everybody's jumping ship. Alright, especially in the regional areas, they jump to where the money is. So Gladstone is really exploding at the moment. What we see is people leaving the university, leaving the Ergon, all of those infrastructure companies, and they go and work for the gas and mining companies up in Gladstone. What we also see is people living in Rockhampton and Gracemere, which is a small suburb of Rockhampton, that's actually now renting homes further away from Gladstone, and their own homes are now being put onto the market, and they're renting that out, making a small profit of about $150, $200 a week on that, because that's the market demand at the moment. Alright, so that's the drive that I wanted to discuss. The second part of tonight's lecture deals with organizational structures, and this now particularly comes to mind in assessment item 2 and 3, when we have to start thinking about our business plan. We have to start thinking about how do we run our business. Is it dependent on the project that we're going to do, the type of work that we're going to do, and how do we decide what type of company we're going to set up. All right, so you have to think about all these things, and of course we're not going to cover everything. But effectively, a business is not about all the work that we do, it's about the managing of the people that we work with. So the more effectively we can manage our people, the more profitable our business should be at the end of the day. There's no real best fit for each type of business. It depends purely on the situation that you're in, and of course the type of business that you're going to run. If you run a construction type business, it might be that you pursue a traditional type of organizational structure. If you run an IT company, it might be that you're going to have multiple projects with the same project managers, with multiple team members working for different project managers, and therefore a matrix system might work better for you. And that depends on where you're going to fit yourself into the market. Alright, so these are the basic types of organizational structures that we get. Traditional, this is the one that's been around forever, basically a pyramid scheme with the CEO at the top, and he's got his people underneath him. There's basically one boss, and he's calling the shots. Then of course we also have the project structure that looks at the different types of projects that we have, and it might employ various project managers in various positions to satisfy our project structure. As we go along, I'll show you a few graphical depictions of those, and that should help you along the way to decide what's the best structure for your organization. The matrix, I'm not too fond of the matrix structure because I've only had bad luck with those. Typically it's one system where you have multiple project managers with the same resources reporting to multiple managers. The problem with that is, of course, who do you work for? Who do you work for? Who do you report to? And what's the outcome of that going to be? The traditional functional structure, it's really a good system when it comes to control, and the reason why it's so good for control is because there's not too many bosses around. There's only one chef in the kitchen and he's calling the shots, and that takes care of all the conflicts that you might have. It's a little bit autocratic, and you can see there I say that the resolution of conflict is by the upper level management. Alright, so the project manager, where does he fit in? Where will we put him? We have to find a position for the project manager in that structure. So this is just a little example of the typical traditional functional structure that we have. The chief exec sits on top, and as I said, a little bit of a triangular shape over there, making it really difficult for anybody to upset the apple cart. Right, if we think about the goods and the bads of a traditional structure, it's really easy to control. There's not a lot in the management because it all happens in one spot. It's a good utilization of scarce resources. Right, the reason is because those resources are really focused on their specific role at that point, and the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined. So it's easy for these guys to say, yes, this is what we want, this is where we're going to go. The disadvantages is, of course, if we have multiple projects. How do we handle the multiple projects? From a democratic point of view, a traditional structure is too autocratic to function, and it's difficult to get that team spirit going in terms of a traditional structure. So you have to keep that in mind when you decide on your structure. Typically, you'll see the older type family businesses, construction companies in Australia, will run with a traditional structure up to a certain point. When the company becomes too big, it will shift into a matrix. Right? So look out for the signs, look out for the changes. There's always a change process going on, and you'll see that in government these changes happen around every 8 to 10 years. Right, every 8 to 10 years they'll either centralize or decentralize, depending on what they did last, and it sometimes also coincides with the elections or just shortly after the elections. Alright, if we look at the project or the pure project structure, this one is where we have once again the chief exec sitting on top, and he's got a dedicated resource for each of these projects. Alright. The downside of this is, of course, cost. Alright, it's really labor intensive, it's really expensive, and it's difficult for us to maintain this if the projects are not successful. Alright, so we have to think about how we're going to do. If we think about centralization of key functions, for instance human resources, finances, those key aspects of a business that we find in each and every company, we can do that. We can save some of that. For instance, marketing might be another option that we can use to centralize one of the functions. You'll still see that each of the projects has its own design, construction and procurement team that focuses on that specific project, and that keeps everybody happy for that specific project. This one is a little bit cheaper than the previous one. If you see the previous one, this is where we have a decentralized model, and this one is centralized. Alright, so centralized, obviously we save a little bit on the management factors of that company. It's a little bit cheaper if it's done correctly. Alright, so I've given you the pros and cons for the project or product structure. Typically what we'll see is, if I'm just going to run back one slide, these staff members that's in these projects, they are particularly loyal to their own project. Right, so it's difficult for this construction manager, for instance, to go and work on that project if project number 3 is in trouble. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. The disadvantages, obviously, cost. All right, because we are duplicating all of these functions, it makes it more difficult for us at the end of the day to save money over here. Technology advancements, because we're working in silos, the technology is not advancing as quick as it could. And that's also the same discussion that you typically would have when it comes to open plan offices or closed offices where people are individually occupying offices. It's been proven that in a situation where we have open plan offices, communication and technology advancements occur easier than in a closed office space. Alright, so if we look at the matrix structure, there we go. This is what it would look like. I'm going to show you a few examples of this, strong and weak matrices. The first point that we have to think about is that these resources over here, they have multiple bosses. So they report to project manager number 1 and they report to the marketing manager over here. So at the end of the day, what makes this one a little bit difficult is who is your boss, and typically this is what happens in large organizations like universities. Alright, so this university is no exception. We also have a matrix system, and it's sometimes difficult to figure out exactly who you're going to work with or work for, especially if you're on a remote campus, alright, because you might have a campus manager and you might have a dean of school, that type of thing. In a construction company, you might have the finance manager over there or the engineering manager over there, and you might have a project manager focusing on a specific pipeline project or a gas to liquid type project, and you have to manage that situation over there. If we look at a weak matrix structure, this is an example of a weak matrix structure, is where the project leader actually falls underneath a major function. Alright, so that we'll see that this guy's authority, the project leader over here, his authority is diluted due to the fact that he falls underneath the engineering manager over there. Alright, so he loses, effectively he loses that authority to call on the resources. He steps down one level on the ladder. Alright, if we look at a strong matrix organization, this one is a little bit different, and this is where the project manager basically has dedicated access to certain resources even though it is in a matrix. So this project manager over here in red, he has access to all of the staff in red over here to make sure that the project is well organized, well executed, and of course that there's no interruptions. Secondary function, the staff will report to the functional managers over there, marketing, finance, engineering, design, that type of thing in our company. Alright, so once again there's our basic advantages and disadvantages. The project manager easily can control the resources and cost. The problem with the problem with matrices is of course who do we work for and where do we allocate the expenditures. Alright, so that's always going to be an issue for us when it comes to choosing the right option. Really difficult to control. It sort of runs out of space really quickly, and then problems ensue shortly afterwards. Alright, and remember that these functional managers, I'll just slip back to this slide, these functional managers might have their own hidden agenda, and that hidden agenda might influence the staff over here in the execution of the project manager's directive. Alright, so keep that in mind when you make your decisions. So which one to choose? There's no real good one that we can say fits all. It has to be independent. You have to decide depending on the type of challenge that you face at that point. The project manager, he has to think about what are the client's requirements. When do we want this project? What does the scope say? Is this a complex project? Is it a greenfields? Is it a brownfields? What's the outcome going to be? What are the constraints that we're going to face? And typically when we talk about the constraints, it's always going to be time, cost and quality, and of course the other 6 project management principles that we always have. From a functional line manager, the issues that he or she faces, obviously what goes into the task, how can I access my resources, when do I get to share my resources, and then of course the technical execution of that. So for a matrix organization to really work well, this you'll see it's been done traditionally really well in information technology companies, Cisco IBM, those types of companies. Lots and lots of training. Make sure that everybody knows exactly what's going on. In a construction company, it's really difficult to shift from a traditional functional structure into a matrix organization, because people don't like change. They typically will try and resist the change, and this is what will happen. You won't get people to buy into the new management style. Right, so the key issue is to train people, make sure that they get on board earlier on, make sure that you have clear role definitions, accountability, responsibility, make sure that they understand what the difference is between accountability and responsibility. And remember, accountability you cannot give away, while responsibility you can easily delegate to a lower level. Alright, and there we go. So in order for you to select an organizational structure, it all depends on the type of information that you have available and the type of business that you're going to do. So for assessment item number 3, where you guys are going to start developing a business plan, it's really important to upfront decide how are we going to manage this whole thing. Is it going to be an autocratic type management style? Is it more going to be participation between the staff members? Is it going to be a traditional? What type of work are we going to do? And hopefully some of you guys will open up businesses outside of the construction industry. I know most of you are in construction, but think outside of the box. This is your opportunity to say, well, I'm going to open up an IT company, or I'm going to open up a company that produces pharmaceutical medicines or something like that, and these are the challenges that I'm going to face. Make it as interestingly as possible. Alright, and that's why those last 3 points that I've got there on the screen, number and type of projects, the duration of the projects, and of course the specialization required. The longer the projects, obviously, the bigger the influence it's going to do. So if we look at the transition to project management, the challenges that we're always going to have when we do a shift from a small company to a large company, the transfer of power. How do we get people to be involved? How do we get them to accept? And it's all about making sure that they're part of the team from the start. All right. Now, traditionally with restructures, there's always going to be casualties, and it's all about how you sell that to the people. Make sure that it doesn't end badly. All right. There's different techniques that you can go about it. Redundancy packages, that type of thing, that also springs to mind. If we think about the types of relationships that we have on when it comes to how we deal with business, this is also going into assessment item number 2 and 3. We have to think about where we position ourselves. What is the service level agreements that we're going to have with the end user of our products? If we're going to build a gas to liquid plant, what kind of scope are we going to get from them? Are we going to be liable for defects? What is the contract all about? And of course we have to choose the contracts that we have between the executor of the project, so the contractors, their personnel. How do we manage that contract over there? And these agreements between the consultants, professional services agreements, why do we have them? How do we pay them? What's their liability? What's their roles and responsibilities that we have to think about? Communication, equally important. We have to define the formal lines between the professional project manager over there and the project management team that sits over there on the side. The project manager is obviously going to manage our project management team. If we have meetings, we don't see the whole project management team there. We basically see a single point of contact or a single point of responsibility, and the information is relayed. And what I try to show with this slide is just the communication lines that exist between the different team members on our projects. And the same with the different types of project structures. Last week we touched on the different types of project structures that you can have in the different types of projects that we have, EPC and EPCM, and traditional and management structures and turnkey. All of those are really important, and we have to think about what's going to be the best one for the project that we are going to follow. and where's our project management team, our independent project manager? Is he going to sit over there, or are we going to get an independent project team that's going to manage our function for us? Alright, so there we go. That's the crux of what I wanted to do tonight. That should give you guys a fair bit of information on how to proceed. In next week's session, we will continue with the HR information, and typically you'll see everything that we did tonight is dealt with in question number 2 of assessment item number 2. So there's a few hints for you. If you have a look at that, it should get you well on the way, and that obviously saves up, it makes up for the time that you spent on all of these other assignments that the lecturers give you. Alright, so Matt and Morgan, any questions from you guys?
No, I think that's pretty much right. I noticed that with previous subjects such as building industry contracts stuff, there was a little bit of other contract types that you've discussed last week.
Mm-hmm.
In your design and construct and your PPP,
Alright.
private
Yep.
partnerships and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Can we choose any of those sort of structures to use, like
It's
rather than just what's covered in this subject?
No, Matt, it's all up to you. Remember, you guys have to do the research, and what I'm trying to do with these sessions is just trigger your thought process, and you still have to go outside and say, yeah, there's other things that I can use, there's other vehicles that I can use. So the world's your oyster. You can use whatever works best for your specific scenario. So if you want to go for a public-private partnership and you have a valid reason for that, perfect. That saves, if you can say it's because of financing reasons or whatever, that will be a great solution.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So any other questions?
And the other ones
Mm-hmm.
was last week it was mentioned about the textbook from the bookshop being the 1994 version.
That's right.
That's what they've sent me. I've just opened that.
Yes,
now.
that is correct.
Is there major changes between it?
Well, what's happened is the 1990. This is another student in the class, Carl. Remember, Carl had this question last week as well, and I've been communicating with him. What's happened is when we designed this course, when this course was updated recently, the 1996 book was still in print. However, the publisher has now stopped printing the 1996 version, and the 1996 version was basically a compendium of the 3 copies that you have. So it's exactly the same information. It was just compiled into a single textbook, and that's why you'll see, Matt, when you try and refer to the page numbers, you might have a little bit of difficulty finding it in the textbook because those page numbers no longer exist in the 1994 edition. All right, so the information is still the same. It's just in a different format.
Joshua?
Because there was a disc included in the
Yes.
like a computer disc included with it, which is like an old-fashioned.
Yeah, I've got the same disc. I don't have a computer that can run that stuff anymore. So I don't know what's on the disc.
Either do I. So just
but I laughed when I opened the package and I found the stiffy disc. I forgot those things existed.
Yeah, that's right. I took it out and I thought, gee, this takes me back to my school days, Even
Lucky it wasn't a floppy.
Yeah, can you remember the 5 1/4-inch floppy discs that we used to have? Those were the first ones. I remember.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question. Not real information you went through tonight because as you said, I've done most of it in infrastructure planning. But with the assignment, I was just looking at that first scenario with the Brisbane International Airport, where basically whoever the contractor is going ahead with all the renovations and installation of the conveyor system, but the Brisbane International Airport is actually responsible for commissioning the installation.
All right. So
just from my point of view, like I don't understand why they want to do that. Like, surely if you're paying a contractor to do it, you'd want them to be responsible for installing and commissioning the whole facility or machinery. Because if there's any problems in the commissioning, it's going to be your problem, isn't it?
That's
You're
right.
the
That's right.
employer.
And that's why I like to add some color to your life, Morgan, because I know in Melbourne you guys, it's like I said previously, you just sit around the street cafes and don't really have any challenges. So I changed the scenario somewhat to make it more difficult. Alright, so in this case, yes, I do agree with you. Normally, the client would require the contractor to commission it, but over here I said specifically ready for commissioning, which means that it excludes certain types of strategies. Right, remember last week, now if you look at the videos, last week we spoke about EPC, Engineer, Procure and Construct, EPCC, Engineer, Procure and Construct and Commission, EPCM, Turnkey, Management Contract. So all of those have different components. Right, so there's two of those that includes commissioning as a specific inclusion in the contract. So EPCC would include commissioning, and a turnkey would also include commissioning. So what I'm basically telling you there is, for question number 1, it's not one of those two. Alright, so you have to choose another one that's going to satisfy the requirements for that Brisbane International Airport where they want to commission their own stuff. Alright, so if you think about that, which one do you think it would be?
Or one that excludes commissioning, or excludes the contractor from commissioning.
Alright, so yeah, I would go for an EPC in that case, because that's the starting point of, you know, we're going to design the system, we're going to procure it, we're going to manufacture it, we're going to install it, but we're not going to commission it. Alright, so maybe it's not the best example, but it gets you thinking.
Yeah. Okay. So those models you explain, like the EPC, EPCC, EPCM, turnkey, that's a that's called a procurement model. Is that,
yep,
that's
there's different terms for that, Matt. It's either called a strategy or a procurement model or a procurement vehicle. So any of those would definitely, you know, you can use it. So that's part of the question that I wanted to ask there, you know, the type of contract. So in that section A there, I would typically want you to say, I will follow an EPC strategy for this project, and I will use these types of contracts when I address the requirements from our client. All right, so that should get you on the way.
Okay.
All right, so yep. So who's got a train in the background?
That's my mobile phone. I'm sorry. I'm just sharing a bit of Melbourne with you guys.
I see.
I should just get a tram bell, and you could feel like you're here. You know.
That's right. Yeah.
Just can't smell the coffee, unfortunately.
Well, we'll soon have to come and do a site visit in Melbourne. I think that's definitely in order.
Well, I've got plenty of jobs if you want to come look at them. So.
Are you offering?
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, well, do you guys have any other questions?
No, I haven't read question 2 of the assignment yet, so...
All right, okay. Well, question number 2, think about that one nicely.
No.
It's an easy one. Just go through the instructions, because each of the paragraphs in the instructions is actually another section of the work that you have to do. So if you follow that carefully, you'll see what the question wants you to do. And also, if you have a look at the forum today, one of the students, Tim, had a few questions. Go and have a look at Tim's questions. I've answered them, and that might also give you a few hints on how to do this one.
Okay.
All right. So for next week, if you guys want something specific that you want us to describe or discuss specifically, you're welcome to just post it on the forum or send me an email, and I'll work it in. I'll make 1 or 2 or 3 extra slides, and we can discuss the questions that you have. All right.
Okay. One last question. I'm just not sure. I'm still a bit confused between my courses, but one we're going to do a group assignment for. Is that for the other one?
It's actually for this one. Assessment item number 3 wants you to do a business plan. All right.
Okay.
Yep. So the business plan, you have to produce it in a document, and you're also going to do a short little presentation using this system like we did in term 2. You're just going to do a presentation and tell us this is your business and this is how we're going to do it, and each of you guys can take a spin at how to do it.
Okay, no worries. What I did, I saw on the forum today, you posted a link to a Google Doc where it's got some teams made up. And there were a couple of groups there ready, so I put myself forward. But how many other people are actually doing this course?
Well,
I
there's
think there was 7. There was a team of 4 and a team of 3.
there's 17 students.
Okay.
There's 17 students at the moment, Morgan. They about a week ago we had 20, but because tomorrow is census date, I think 3 of them cancelled the course, and that happens, because they realize it's too much work or whatever. So at the moment there's 17 students, and if we find that you don't have mates to play with for this assessment item, I'll publish the final group names in any case a little bit later on, and then it's up to you to say yes, fit me into this group or fit me into that group, or that's easy to do at that stage.
Okay, well I've put a advertisement up for my services on the forum. If
I saw that, yeah, something about the first person to take you for a test drive will buy you, that type of thing, yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Motor plan, air conditioning, electric windows.
Yeah. No beach.
No beach, yes, and an anti-rust electronic device.
No, that's...
Okay.
No, that's
What, lady owner always garage.
yeah, that's beach like in sand, eh? All right, so on that point, just before I get myself into trouble, I'll see you guys next week.
Better stop digging.
Yeah, for sure. All right,
Alright, see ya.
see you later. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Morgan.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.